My wife will be looking at Instagram of like, I don't even know what's going on. And she's like, what are you looking at? I'm like, this advisor's fee schedule is crazy. She's like, don't you want a break?
Is it safe to say that when you hear that, like, go ask your CPA, that's their way of saying, I don't care?
Who don't you work with? Who would reach out to you and offer to pay you money and you would say, no, thank you. You're actually not the best fit for the type of work we do.
You want someone that is anticipating your needs in the future because you're building wealth. And when you're building wealth, needs and things change. You want someone that's focused on you, right? Like their specialty is you.
Speaking to a CPA and an advisor and an insurer is madness. Welcome back to Beyond the First Million by Drucker Wealth. I'm Gideon Drucker. This is
Jordan Haines.
And last week we spoke about how to think about goals versus priorities, right? And how to turn your goals into priorities that are actionable. And this week we are going to be speaking about the financial advisor jargon and nonsense that maybe drives us a little crazy. And I think in talking about that, it'll help anybody that's looking for a planner or how to think about it, figure out really what they're looking for. But before we do that, before we started filming, so we're in New Jersey right now, but I live in New York, and Jordan lives.
I've never been to Jersey. This is my
What do we
first time.
think so far?
It's great.
Yeah, New York's still bad.
I honestly had no expectations about Jersey.
Why this is, I think, important to discuss is you mentioned that you live in Idaho, so you just had some New Jersey, New York pizza, and you said that Costco pizza is the best pizza around where you live. Better than Domino's, better than.
Yeah, it's the best chain pizza.
Yeah,
and we'll just leave it at that.
Jordan has a lot going for him. His, food, pizza decisions are not one of them, but there are other reasons you're on the pod.
I have a highly tuned taste buds.
You did bring us some sourdough, so we appreciate that. The only other thing, and I'm still reeling a little bit, but I'll move past the pizza situation, is we have an outline and agenda, what we want to speak about, these first few episodes. Mainly because I think the only people watching and listening are my wife and my mother and your wife and your mother.
Yep.
And like my sister, I'm like 50-50. I'm going to call her out. I doubt she's watching this. So for now, we have what we want to talk about, what we think would be interesting, but we do want to hear from anybody that's listening, that's watching. So if you have ideas, thoughts, you know how to find us. It'll be on the bottom of this. And we're happy to talk about whatever is interesting to the people we are trying to reach. So future episodes can be sponsored, not literally, but submitted. Who knows? One thing.
It's going to be huge.
It's going to be huge. Yeah. Costco might be our first sponsor, but we want to hear from you, and we're happy to talk about what is interesting to who we're speaking about. So look, we want this podcast to be real talk about financial decision making, right? Like I said in I think the first episode, we're not stock picking. We're not even outlining how to do a backdoor Roth IRA. I mean, we can talk about that in the context of decision-making later on, but we want this to be about what happens in the lives of our clients day to day. One of those things is interacting with financial planners and CPAs and investment advisors and whatever, we all want to call ourselves. So I think today's episode, talking about what to look out for, what to think about, when is the right time, the questions to ask. And Jordan and I have a lot of opinions on this subject, so we are going to make sure, this could be our first 4-hour podcast, but we are going to make sure it's not. So, I'm going to start out with a little bit of history, because I think we've both experienced people that think they're not ready for a financial advisor because of what they think an advisor does. That they're maybe stuck 15 years in the past. And I mean, what are some of the most maybe common things you hear of somebody that, oh, I didn't even know an advisor could do that, or I didn't know I was ready to be working with someone?
I'll just say, I think almost everyone here has had some interaction with an advisor or exposure to one. Whether it's you've worked with someone directly, your parents have worked with someone, you've seen a video, you've got a news story of someone. Like there's a lot of different things. I'd say that the place to very first start is like, what is a financial advisor? That is frankly, I think, one of the hardest things for most people, because they have preconceived notions about what a financial advisor does. So in my mind, and I'll just provide this like really simple script because I know we'll get into history, but it's important to differentiate like, what are you actually looking for a financial advisor to solve?
Well, what are a few things you could be looking for, right?
Like if you're looking for someone to give you guidance on your financial life and help you achieve your goals, that's pretty broad, right? Like you want someone that is really focused on you and your goals and your priorities, versus if you want to go and just like find an investment manager who's going to just return you as much money as you possibly can. That's very
a portfolio manager.
The difficult thing is,
the
difficult thing is they would both say, I'm a financial advisor.
Right.
That's where it gets tricky, because one is really just a specialist, really focused on one area of finance. Whereas the other one's kind of a more generalist, focused on a lot of areas, but really just dialed in on how those areas
Right, and their job is to coordinate, right? So I think what you said, so many people call themselves financial advisor, right? Your local or not so local insurance agent, that primarily or in some cases only does, sells life insurance, like they literally can't advise on investments, is a financial advisor. The portfolio manager that is only talking about your investment allocation, also a financial advisor. Somebody that advises on education funding versus retirement, also advisor. We can go down the list.
Right.
So we want to explain a little bit of how we got there. I hesitate to use the H word history because I don't, the history of wealth management, I think is only interesting to the two of us. But I think it's helpful to explain why, we have this term, this catch-all term. So I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, definitely further than that, somebody having a financial advisor really meant that they had a portfolio manager. It was somebody was hired to manage your assets, your 401k, your IRA, your taxable accounts, what have you. And they were paid specifically and exclusively to manage that account. And again, I'm painting with a broad brush. There were excellent financial planners 15 years ago. But if we look at, percentages and the overall, I think it's fair to say the overwhelming majority of people that had an advisor were working with somebody that was paid to manage investments. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing that's changed is, in today's, what we do, investment management, and you just alluded to it, is one part of financial planning, right? It's, if you think of a flywheel, we like to say it's one of the 8 things that you might be advising on, along with estate planning, tax coordination, insurance, cash flow, retirement projections, education funding, and the life goals that we spent, the first 2 episodes speaking about. Mm-hmm. And this kind of happened organically and naturally, and not anybody's fault in that it was really the only way advisors could charge back in the day. Like nobody was paying for financial planning as a standalone service. They didn't, the technology, the means to even do that. So it kind of resulted in the people that had advisors were older, retirees. Why? Because that's where the money was, right? The older you are, the most likely you are to accumulate assets. Mm-hmm. And it was only people that had a certain level of assets that could advise on that. But for now, how things have changed, we get calls all the time, what we call our right fit calls, where somebody says, I have an advisor, XYZ location, because I don't need to be, on the receiving end of a large bank or, insurance company, what have you. So I work with them. They're great. They manage my accounts, but I'm really looking for planning and they don't do that. And in my head, I'm just like, so what, from Office Space, what would you say you do here? Yeah. Seriously, what does the advisor do if the only thing they're looking at are the investments?
What's been interesting to me too is when I hear people talk about either their current advisor, it could be their CPA, an insurance person. You probably get this too. I often I'll say, okay, how do you like them? Fine. Fine is the way that is described a lot. And there's something when I poke and prod a little bit and try to understand what's missing right now. It's often common that it's hard to articulate what's exactly missing. And eventually we get to the point where it's we're missing more of what we would describe as holistic, right? Something that's a little bit more, they're looking at all the different areas and how they interact and things like that.
It's also, if you don't know what you should be expecting, it's pretty tough to identify what somebody is doing.
Well, because you're walking around and you find a guy that you like or a gal that you like and it's just, I don't even know what questions to ask this person to know if they're good.
Right. So we will get to, because I think, asking the right questions is super important. But I would say if I gave a little bit of the, 10, 15 years ago, financial planning boiled down to investments or insurance, I would say today, the way I think we see our jobs more than anything is it's integrating all the different parts, taxes, insurance, estate, cash flow into one approach. So, an advisor has to do more, quite frankly, to warrant the business, because investment management is important. But I would, even on that, and might take us in a whole different direction, but investment management is important. But that investment management and picking the investment strategy are not the same thing.
They're very different.
Right? Picking the investment strategy is 1/10, 1/5, whatever you want to call it, of the investment strategy. What are the other components, right? If we're saying, hey, picking the funds, even if you were just talking about investment management, picking the funds or the stocks or the bonds, index funds, mutual funds, whatever you want to use, is one part of it. Because even before then, you have to pick, what are the tax vehicles we want to use, right? Roth IRAs, HSAs, 529s, how much do we want to fund each one, right? Yeah. More for retirement, more for college, more for the short term. And so what vehicles do we want to use? How much do we want to fund each one? And then once you have the asset allocation that actually makes sense for your goals, then we dive into the funds that you need. And then you dive into, all right, well, what should be our rebalancing cadence, right? How much, and I think I made fun of like the drift bait, but that is a part of the investment, allocation. Then it's how much cash do we want to keep? How do we withdraw money in a tax efficient way? Are we tax loss harvesting? Are we, have a tax location across portfolios? And I'm going quick on this because the point is not that we, make sense of all of this, but there's a lot more under the hood of what, and I had, real financial planning. And it's a little bit, I don't love using that term, but I think that is what we are trying to get at.
The word holistic is thrown around in a lot of different contexts nowadays. So like a lot of people, when I use the word holistic, often what I think of is your financial health has a lot of different components. Investments, for example, is one of those. And even within investments and building an investment strategy, there's a lot that goes into it. But everything interacts with everything else. That's what I mean when I say holistic. So when you make a decision from an investment standpoint, it's going to have a tax implication. If you make a tax decision, it's going to have an implication on your cash flow. And frankly, all of these are intertwined with what we talked about last week around like your goals and your objectives and your priorities with your life. Everything interacts with everything else.
Hey, that's why we started. And I think, we're 3 episodes in. This is like the first like real pitch of what Drucker Wealth does. But, we just launched our tax business to do tax prep and filing for our ongoing wealth management clients. My dream was never to own a tax firm. I don't even do my own taxes, to our prior point of I know how to do it. I look at tax returns every day, but it's not the best use of my time. But, so I didn't, we didn't want to have a tax business. Why did we set it up? And we have, a lot of our clients are using our tax prep and filing team. It was the number one thing we got asked over the last 4 to 5 years is, hey, I love you guys. You handle this, you do that. But like, my CPA is like, which a CPA is a tough job, to be fair. A CPA is a little bit like a ref in sports. They're only called out when they do something wrong. But nobody's ever like, oh, my CPA, that ref, he refed an incredible game. It's just if they mess something up. But we heard that over and over again. And we said, hey, the future of being a financial planner, the future of what our clients and this, are looking for is integrating tax estate planning and only having to go through one firm to do so. Like, we know the number one thing our clients are looking for is to save time, right? Like they're meeting with us after picking their kids up from practice, feeding them dinner, putting them to sleep, and then going back to work. And they have like an hour and a half gap in between to maybe deal with everything for a given week with their lives. Speaking to a CPA and an advisor and an insurance is madness.
And ideally you have an advisor or someone, I'm using that advisor as like that holistic special. When we work with a client, we know that client so well. We know their dreams, their aspirations. We can then help coordinate with those other people that are needed, right? So being able to go through that person who knows you really well and what you want out of life, I think that's really helpful because then you get the right specialist.
Having it all in one place. And, I've said this, to a few people that have reached out. We are not trying to become, a tax firm. Like, some people have reached out, hey, can you guys do my taxes? No, we do that for our clients because we want to create that one-stop shop feel. And again, this is how Drucker Wealth does it. But quite frankly, the reason we're doing this now is because I think in 10 years, 5 years, I think the idea, just like right now, we're saying it's outdated and ridiculous for an advisor to just do your investments, to just focus on your investment management. In another 5 years, it will be equally ridiculous for an advisor to just do financial planning and investment management without the taxes, without the estate altogether. So these are things to think about. When somebody books a call with us, we have, hey, what questions should you ask an advisor just to get people thinking? Because you made the point before, sometimes people, when you ask, how do you like your advisor? Good, fine. Like they're really nice. They send me something on my birthday. They don't really have a way of quantifying. And that goes even more if you've never had an advisor and you reach out and you're trying to judge who would be a good fit for you. I like providing them questions of, hey, here are the 10 questions you should ask. And like, if you want to ask me 10 questions, go for it. But most of them say, hey, what are the 3 that make the most sense?
Sure.
If my sister and her family wasn't working with me, who would I tell them? How would I help them identify who they should be working with? Because I always kind of think in that family standpoint. But one of my favorite questions I would ask somebody to ask any professional they're working with, right? We hire consultants, we hire professionals in other walks. Who don't you work with? Who would reach out to you and offer to pay you money and you would say, no, thank you. You're actually not the best fit for the type of work we do. Because anybody that doesn't have a clear answer to that or can't find an answer to that is basically saying we will take on anybody that pay us. And we don't have a niche. We don't have, there's not a specific type of person that we are best suited to working with, which gets at like kind of the generalist, like, hey, I'm an advisor and I will work with anybody who reaches out that needs this or that. As opposed to, again, like this whole podcast, who is dedicated towards high income earning mid-career professionals. When people in their 20s reach out for these calls, I try to be helpful and I say, hey, I would do this, like as a first step, not providing investment advice for the compliance people that are just floating in the air. But hey, this would be the first thing I would think about. And then I might hire a hourly planner, because you kind of just need, this is going to sound conceited, but you don't need to hire Michael Jordan to train your 4-year-old and how to hit a layup. Right? Like the 4-year-old's older brother can probably handle that. So on the same token, we're not trying to work with somebody that's 75 years old, is worried about required minimum distributions and legacy planning for their great grandkids. Not because that's not important and they don't need help, that it is and they do, but that is not what we do best. And I think this is a whole side tangent, and then I'll catch a breath. Doctors and physicians figured out a long time ago that specialization is important, right? You wouldn't hire a heart surgeon to, speak with your 4-year-old when they run a fever, or vice versa. And people tend to think, well, the heart surgeon could do everything. It's the pediatrician that you don't want doing heart surgery. And I would say it's actually both, right? Like there's a soft skill set. There's something, when you're dealing with kids, and again, I'm making the point, but it works in the same direction, right?
Yeah.
You want to find somebody that actually specializes in exactly the stage of life you're at, what you need help with, and take it from there.
Yeah, I would say, not flipping that around, but maybe saying it differently. The focus, right? If there's a specialist and then there's like a holistic advisor, right? You want someone that's focused on you, right? Like their specialty is you, and people are different, right? So in the past life, I worked with only dentists, and dentists have really unique things that typically only dentists have. And so finding an advisor that focuses on you as a person is going to be the most helpful. Not necessarily focusing on a specific topic of finance.
Right. Exactly.
I am really good at this investment strategy. Okay, great. That's like you're focused on creating some sort of a supply in the world, hoping that people want it. No. You want someone that's focused on you, the things that you're demanding, the things that you want in your life. Yeah.
Right. You mentioned you used to work with dentists, right, in your past life. So even that, like I keep emphasizing the stage of life, right? A lot of our parents, although not explicitly, but in their 40s, at that stage of life, right? Where they're, making a lot of money. They've been working for 15, 20 years. They're thinking about next steps. But even professionally, like that's a good distinction. Now, I think there are diminishing returns as a client of like, oh, we need to work with somebody that's, left-handed and lives on this street and only works in, is a dentist and only works with, so and so forth. But like for us, most of our clients are W-2 income earners. And if we have self-employed clients, it's usually the spouse of, right? So we work with a lot of people at Google, at Amazon, at some of the big tech companies. Now their spouse might have a business, and that's great. And there's a lot of planning. I would say if I was a matchmaker, I would pair like somebody, W-2 high income earner with a
business
owner for the just joint tax benefits. Yeah. There are probably reasons I'm not a matchmacher, if that's how I'm thinking about it.
He's not encouraging all you people to go out and quit your jobs and just start.
Right. No,
there's a lot.
No, I'm encouraging you to find somebody that, that already is doing the other thing. So we work with those folks because yes, you can help, but we don't work with somebody that, is a business owner and they have 15 employees and they're a C corporation and they're trying to get, right? That's a totally different planning, way of thinking, what you need. And identifying that early is a pretty cool thing. There are two extremes. I think you and I like to nerd out when we talk about sometimes how advisors present themselves out in the world. Now, the one extreme that I think we're talking about, is not even how they present themselves. It's just the reality is, you ask your advisor or prospective advisor a tax question.
Right.
Talk to your CPA. Like in 2026, I think the idea of an advisor saying, talk to your CPA as their catch-all for tax advice is crazy. Now, yes, there are certain things that if you're not also doing the tax prep and filing, right, that you need to rely on that. But that's usually not what clients aren't asking, like, hey, what's my itemized deduction this year? Like, most people know they're not asking their planner that. But if they say, hey, how should I be thinking about tax strategy for the next 5 years? The follow-up answer from an advisor should not be, you should probably speak to your CPA. It's like, and I would ask, like, hey, what is your tax philosophy? How do you incorporate taxes? It's one of those things, it matters less what the answer is, right? I wouldn't say there's one answer you should be searching out, but that they should have a philosophy. They should have a thought. They should be able to identify that.
Is it safe to say that when you hear that, like, go ask your CPA, that's their way of saying, I don't care?
I don't care. Sometimes I feel bad. Sometimes they're at a big box. They're just not set up to give tax advice, right? And they're just not able to. So I'll take the charitable, view of it that like they do care, but they haven't gone deep enough, or they don't, that's not incorporated into their planning.
Okay.
But I mean, there are absolutely advisors that, hey, I want to do this one thing, whether that's, manage your 401k, sell you insurance, open up this account, and anything that's outside the strictures of that are kind of getting in the way of, the thing I ultimately want to do. Kind of to the second question, because it'll kind of reveal itself, is what's your service calendar? That's how because that question identifies, are you talking to someone that considers themselves in the service business, right? That they're providing advice and coaching, right? All throughout the year. They're managing your investments, which I think is important and should be incorporated. And they're doing planning. They're meeting with you to update the plan. They're working through their cash flows. And again, whether it's twice a year, 3 times a year, whether they send a Loom video there's a lot of different ways of doing it. But there should be a calendar, and it should be more than, we go through their investment accounts once a year for a portfolio.
We just do a review, right? Like that, yeah. I think a different way of phrasing that question might be like, which is sad. I think you say service calendar, some advisors might blank stare at you in the face, which is fine. Like, separate conversation.
It's not how they do things.
It's not how they do things. Fine. They may not use the word service calendar. Said differently, how will you actually work with me? Like, what's your process?
How will you make sure that I'm continuously on track?
Process is a key word here. What's your process for helping make sure we're on track or building our financial plan, whatever that is? Because that's going to give you insight into how they actually work with you. And I think you want to look at it from like initially, because a lot of advisors, like ourselves included, will start by doing a full, analysis and looking at your situation. Great. But what happens after that? How do they make sure you're maintaining progress, that you're updating things, because your life will change. And just doing a review is just not going to cut it, right? Like a review is a placeholder for an advisor saying, we'll just chat.
Well, I think we're saying the term review to mean like an investment, like, hey, here's what you earned in your portfolio. And, we have reviews with clients all throughout the year. And we spend so little of the review talking. You can look at your investment performance every single day. At any time you want on your phone. I strongly recommend not doing that. And we'll have entire podcast about investment, but you can do that on your own. You don't need the advisor to tell you what the performance of your portfolio is. And the amount of times we still hear, I have an annual review and we go through the investment performance.
Like, what's that going to do?
Right. Like, how is that moving the ball forward in your financial life? Now, I think we've been soft to this point on this podcast, because I think we said we were going to talk about the nonsense advisors talk about. And so far, we've really just been, hey, how should you, potential person that is looking to hire a financial planner, think about picking a financial planner? What questions should you ask? All that's important. But we said we were going to get, a little real. So something that I know, and, we spend way too much time probably, on LinkedIn. I scroll LinkedIn at night, the way people scroll. My wife will be looking at Instagram of like, I don't even know what's going on. And she's like, what are you looking at? I'm like, this advisor's fee schedule is crazy. She's like, don't you want a break? Isn't this enough probably? But anyway, so we spend a lot of time, in that. And, there are certain advisors, and we're going to see how this goes, because I'm getting a little bit in the weeds. So, this might resonate, it might not. Almost act like, they're not running a business, that, what they do is, they're saving the world. They're virtuous, holier than thou.
They're
like
attaching a moral something.
Right. Now, what we do is important. And, we get to literally guide clients through financial independence. And like, we've both been on meetings where we're like, wow, that was effing awesome. Like they are in a different place because of the advice we gave. But at the end of the day, we are also, we're running a business. And I actually think that's maybe that, that's from our perspective. It's like these advisors, like they're presenting one face to then, all right, they're also running a business. But why I think it's important, and I'm brutally honest in our newsletters to clients of like, hey, here's how our business is doing. We've grown, here's how we're growing. Here's how many new, team members we have. Because, if I were a client, I would want to work with an advisory firm that is interested in growth. Because how you grow, you know what more revenue as a business means? That you can provide more services and more value to your clients. Why are we able to build out a tax division? Because we are growing and clients really want our help. And then those clients want us to do even more for them. And it's a self-fulfilling, I think we are not building a, 1,000 advisor, mega shop where nobody knows, we're a small, family owned firm. But we're getting big enough where we can start providing these additional services. And, us being, recognized and growing and hiring more advisors and more, like that all ends up a benefit for the client. And I think this idea of, well, I shouldn't talk to people as a business about like how my business is doing or how we're growing. No, clients want to know. I want my CPA to crush it. Yeah. Because then I know they're going to keep reinvesting. It's the people that aren't, that are almost like, hey, I'm good where things are. Like, all right, well, the industry is moving, the rules, the regulations, like you need to get better constantly. I love that idea of, with my other professionals, like they are constantly striving to be better. Mm-hmm. And that's going to benefit me as the end user. So
we didn't spend a lot of time on this, but I know in past episode we talked about my history, and I've been in this industry for a long time, but I spent 5 years of that in technology. A lot of the listeners to the show probably spend their time in a technology company or in a growing company. Yeah. Some of you have probably been around an organization that is not growing. And the downstream trickle effects of a stalled or a declining company is it affects everything. It doesn't just affect how many people are there, it affects the ability to deliver great service. And frankly, I mean, if you want to get overly simplistic, a growing company tends to be healthy because they're helping people succeed. And ideally, an advisor that you talk to is helping their clients succeed and thereby growing. It's a really easy way to figure out if this financial advisor, if this financial professional is going to help me succeed in the things that I want. If they're growing, they're likely helping you succeed and they're helping other people succeed. And that's what you want.
And guess what? Our clients are also growing in their own lives, right? Like somebody we met 5 years ago when they were 40 and they're making 500. Now they're, in some cases making double the money and they're 5 years older. They haven't, they want to know that we're evolving with them as their lives, that we're not stuck. All right, now we said we work with 35-year-olds. Now it's 10 years later. You're 45, but we're stuck doing the same thing. So anyway, we're trying to tie this back to, a question. So the question is, where, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Advisor, where do you see, your firm in 5 years? What type of work do you want to be doing? Who do you want to be working with? And how big or small do you want to be? Yeah. That's different for everybody, right? Somebody might want to work with just a one-to-one, but they also know they're not going to get the additional services, the additional values, right? I wouldn't, personally want to be part of a big bots, a 1-800 number, right? Type client experience. I happen to think that in between is a good place to be. Not coincidentally, that's what we look like. I say not coincidentally, tongue in cheek.
We're super biased.
Yes, but also obviously. We're super biased, but we're also building towards the thing we think is the best. Otherwise, we wouldn't be building to that thing. We'd be, trying to keep things the way they are.
Can I add one more thing to this? Because I think it's important. A growing, we're using that word loosely, right? A growing firm might grow to a certain point and say, hey, this is good enough, but we're going to continue to grow with our clients. Typically, when you grow, you anticipate the future a little bit. You're thinking about and you're getting ready and you're building infrastructure and services and things like that for the future. And so as you start thinking through financial professionals that you want to work with, there's all sorts of shapes and sizes, right? There are what we would call a solo advisor, someone who's just by themselves, and maybe it's a more intimate relationship. And even if they're not growing their team, they might still be growing their business. They might still be anticipating the future and thinking how you can succeed. I think that's the important principle. It's just you want someone that is anticipating your needs in the future because you're building wealth. And when you're building wealth, needs and things change.
Yeah, it gets more complex. Yeah. Inevitably, it gets more complex.
It always does.
It never goes the opposite direction where, all right, I needed that complexity, but actually in 5 years, it's going to be more simple. But, the one-on-one relationship's important, right? Every client of Drucker Wealth has a lead planner that they are working with. And we like to say almost like they're a relationship manager because the way we've built out the team, there's in-house CPAs, there's the estate planner, there's the client service team, but it's all filtered through the relationship, which is what we each of us primarily do, that everything is funneled through. Because again, you don't want 9 people reaching out, you want that coordinated, but if they can all be speaking before it even gets you, that's a pretty cool thing. So we'll keep having, in between, I think some of our conversations around planning and, more, hey, how do you think about wealth? We'll have every now and then an episode about the industry, about Drucker Wealth, maybe a little bit more, exclusively about what to look for in advisors. And we'll get a little bit more granular. There was a lot we stayed away from just because I think it would take an entire 40 minutes to explain the thing before we got to the point. But we want to mix these in because if you're at the stage of life that we're talking to, you're thinking about this, you're having questions. Maybe you decide I want to do it myself forever and ever. These individual episodes might not be the ones that marinate, but it's good to know what's out there. It's good to know what you're missing and, what you're enjoying. So we'll sprinkle these in as we go. Next week, we're going to be speaking about family and education planning, how we think through that as part of your broader financial plan. And again, if you have questions, ideas, anything you want us to speak about, share, please write in the comments, and we'll see you next week.